Now pardon me, Pete, but I'm gonna go on a bit of a tangent, if you'll pardon the indulgence. It concerns a place you may have heard of, far to the north of the civilized lands of the United States. A vast, rugged land where the wolves still run wild, and the moose and the grizzly are kings. It was a strange but beautiful place called Canada, home to a friendly but wild breed of humanity known as Canadians. So Matthew, why are the denizens of Canada called Canadians? Pete asked me, his voice still perfectly clear despite the roar of the helicopter's propellers. Because their country is called Canada, I informed him with a gentle smirk. It doesn't really flow though, does it? Canadians from Canada? No, I don't like it. They should be called Canadans. I would much prefer that. How do you figure, Pete? I asked him. Well, you yourself are an American from America, yes? So shouldn't they be Canadans from Canada? That sounds much more pleasing to the ear. Huh. Well, Pete, I hadn't thought of it like that before. I suppose I don't disagree with you, but I'm not the fella who's going to tell some Canuck that his country's doing it wrong. I like my teeth just where they're at. It's not the only solution, sir. They could also try changing their nation's name to Canada, Pete said. I'm not sure if that's better or worse, Bart, I told him. Anywho, I'm only bringing up Canada to make mention of the one Canadian man I revered above all others, the late Rowdy Roddy Piper. Oh my, what a boisterous-sounding name. Pete, you're completely correct, bud. Roddy Piper was boisterous. Like all of history's greatest men, the rowdy one was known for taking things to the extreme. He had a wildness in his heart that set him apart from others, a thirst for adventure and violence that set him on the path of the outsider, practicing the only profession a warrior like him could possibly follow. Which was? Pete asked. Professional wrestling. Pete was quiet for a few moments, digesting that tidbit. Then he said, Sir, if I may interject? You may, I said graciously. Sir, isn't professional wrestling a choreographed performance, with the outcome decided in advance? How could this rowdy one possibly be considered a warrior, if he was merely participating in a staged pantomime of battle? Ah, Pete, professional wrestling, or as I like to call it in my heart of hearts, wrestling, goes beyond being a predetermined fight. You must understand the storylines and the motivation of the participants might be false, but the athleticism and the charisma of the participants is 100% genuine. The danger is real too. No matter how bad your acting skills may be, getting hit on the head with a folding chair is still taking a big risk. Ah. And it goes beyond the show itself, Pete. When a match is as good as it can be, you'll get so involved that you won't care if the story is fake or predictable, because the way the fighters tell that story is so entertaining, you'll get swept up in it. Then it becomes bigger than a mere match between two people pretending to be rivals. It becomes an age-old tale about good versus evil, right versus wrong, fair versus false. Oh, that does sound interesting, sir. It really is. A good wrestling match teaches us about what matters in life. When the good guy wins, it's because good always triumphs in the end. When the bad guy wins, it's because he was so desperate to survive, he resorted to cheating like the scum he is. But he'll eventually fall in the end because the righteous never give up. A wrong must always be avenged. A tyrant must eventually be toppled. That's just how it is in the world of wrestling. And that's how it ought to be in the real world too. I believe I understand. Despite the garishness and rude language, wrestling imparts important values to its audience about morality and persistence, about the values of self-belief, respect for tradition, and appreciation for others. Exactly that, I agreed. Also, it's fun watching some jackass heel champion run his mouth on the microphone, getting everyone all riled up, just to see him get his butt kicked at the big pay-per-view. Why only at the pay-per-view? Asked Pete. Well, they can't do title changes on regular television, Pete. People gotta make a living, you know. Ah, moral education with an emphasis on capitalism as well. Such an interesting dichotomy. Terran culture is endlessly fascinating. Yeah, us humans are like peanuts at a steakhouse, aren't we? What were you going for tonight? Screamed Borman in terror. His face was as white as a sheet, and his grip on his armrest was tight as iron. Taking one look at this supposedly famous warrior, I could only shake my head in dismay at how much of a scaredy cat he was. O Lord of Light and Lady of Mercy, I beg you grant my unworthy soul a place in paradise at your table, if I am worthy, he prayed fervently, as Skywolf gave us another small shake caused by air turbulence. It wasn't even a big shake either, I'm telling you. This angelic machine ran smooth, but try telling that to this old pussycat. Even Amanda was giving her old man a sideways glance. In the back, the kid sat blissfully in her seat, watching an episode of Blue's Clues and giving out a delighted cheer every time the copter shook a little. I'll admit it. She was growing on me. So, why bring up Roddy Piper and the nation of Canada? Pete continued. Oh, Canada just fascinates me in general, if I'm being honest, I told him. I'm a little bit of a history buff. I love reading about the 2 world wars. America played a big part in them, which is a well-known fact, but Canada was no slouch either. Hell, they weren't just participants, Pete. They were fucking feared, if you'll pardon my French. Checking. Yes, that is correct. The Canadian military during the Great War was known for a preference for efficiency and swift resolution to conflict, often discarding more humanitarian tactics for quicker victories. A famous Canadian general is quoted as saying, "If you hate fleas, burn the cats." God damn, that sounds just like them, I said with a grin. It certainly contrasts with the popular stereotype of them as your polite neighbours to the north. Now, Pete, I have a personal theory about Canadian politeness. I think a Canadian's good manners are like the optical camouflage that the aliens in the Predator movies use to hide themselves, just before they sneak up on the fella and shove a spear through his neck. Oh my. Think about it. Some random GI on patrol gets ambushed in the jungle and pulled screaming up a tree before he can fight back. Help comes running, but it's far too late and no one sees anything in the area, except Dell from Montreal sitting on the tree branch, clinging a brand new skull trophy. Hey Dell, says one of the soldiers. You see where Mish went? Oh, sorry guy, didn't see a thing, eh? Dell calmly responds. No worries, Dell. God, I hope we find this monster soon. Ah, well, see you Wednesday for curling? Oh, you couldn't keep me away, guy. Night. Night. A terrifying act of misdirection, Pete said in awe. Yeah, I figure it's just like that, but more realistic. With a lot more baby seal clubbing, I said. Well, I shall certainly be on my guard if ever we encounter a denizen of Earth's forsaken north. Doesn't hurt to be wary, Pard. Canadians are basically well-mannered Vikings. You ever read their history? Bunch of soft-spoken savages is what. Did you know they once burned down our capital for no good reason? Just marched south and torched the White House. How's that for a how-do-you-do? Wasn't that in retaliation for the US sacking of Toronto? Bullshit, Pete. America did nothing to nobody. That's actually not true in the slightest. Only patriots in this chopper, Pete, I said firmly. Patriotism isn't necessarily the unquestioning support of your country, Sir Matthew. Sometimes the most patriotic thing you can do is to question the motives of your leaders. A nation thrives when governed by rational thinkers instead of angry reactionaries. Well, that may be true, but when the mob and the press and the whole world tells you to move, your job is to plant yourself like a tree by the river of truth and tell the whole world, no, you move. Wow, who said that? I asked him, genuinely impressed. Captain America. Shoot, really? Captain America wasn't Batman, but I still respected him. The man punched Hitler, after all. Indeed. You know, Captain America is the only Democrat my grandpa ever liked. A Roosevelt liberal. Believed in using big government to help out the little man and in tight regulations on corporate power. Damn good president, that FDR. Might have been disabled, but he carried the nation on his back. I am enjoying this conversation, sir, but I must inform you that we've arrived at Lord Vexafius's compound. Oh, shoot. I never got around to explaining Roddy Piper, I said sadly. Why did you bring up Roddy Piper? I'm very curious about that now. Hell comes to Frogtown, I said. What? Roddy Piper dabbled in acting as well as wrestling. He was actually pretty good at it. Got a lot of roles, even got a top billing a few times. And one of the weirdest movies he ever did was a flick called Hell Comes to Frogtown. Hell Comes to Frogtown, Pete said carefully. What a strange title. What was it about? Heh, I have no idea, I said gleefully. What? Pete asked me in surprise. I'm being serious, I have no idea. Just hearing the title of that movie was enough for me. Hell Comes to Frogtown. It was like a box of mystery. Like a Christmas gift with extra thick wrapping. As soon as I heard that name, I knew that I never wanted to know what it was about. Why is that, Sir Matthew? Because sometimes, Pete, a name alone is enough. Look at Snakes on a Plane. Snakes on a Plane was perfection itself. That was a name that couldn't be matched, but people couldn't leave it alone and weren't content to bask in the mystery. So, what was once a perfect title in and of itself became the labelling for a mediocre film. So, by avoiding gaining knowledge of the rowdy Roddy Piper film, Hell Comes to Frogtown, then I keep the magic alive. What is Frogtown? Why is Frogtown? What is the hell that came to it? It can be anything, Pete. Anything at all. Like this filthy slave compound where my fellow humans have been kidnapped, mistreated and murdered by elves and blue weirdies for who knows how long. This shitty place sure seems like a Frogtown to me, pard.
Really?
Yeppers. Look at us in this glorious flying death machine, bristling with an absolutely unholy number of armaments, here to make things right for the survivors, and to even the score for the dead. It sure seems to me like we're the hell that came to Frogtown, don't it?
I find your statements to be bewilderingly absurd, Sir Matthew, and yet I find myself being inspired anyway.
Glad to hear it, pard. Now why don't you start priming those air-to-surface rockets we painstakingly crafted? Time to teach these cowardly bastards the alphabet of annihilation. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. This and towards the enemy. You'll place my guns, now surround. Time to put you in the ground. Now you know my ABCs. Next time just don't fuck with me.